Good evening and welcome to the monthly meeting of the Arlington Board of Zoning Appeals, which is also known as the BZA. I'm Charles Smith, Chairman of the Board. The Board is made up of 5 citizens appointed by the Circuit Court. In addition to myself, we have Judy Freshman to my immediate left, Inta Malice to my immediate right, Paul Melnick, who has just joined us, and Peter Owen to my far left. Also present is the professional staff, including Stephen Rissy, the coordinator, who's to my extreme far left, who's the coordinator for the BZA and serves as our secretary. In addition, we have staff assisting us. We have Mark Hamela, a zoning technician, at the computer up front, if you need anything posted on the screen behind us, and Jacque McNeil, the zoning administrative technician, to whom you will give your speaker slips, which I'll describe in a moment. Now, I want to thank everyone for being here and extend a warm welcome to you all. To avoid disruptions, I ask that you turn your cell phones off or put them in a silent mode. On the front table, you'll find a series of reports. There is one for each case on tonight's agenda. If you haven't had a chance to see your report, I encourage you to come down, take a look at it, and then put it back on the table in the event that anyone else wants to look at it. This board's powers are prescribed in the Code of Virginia and are set out in further detail in the county zoning ordinance, which of course is adopted by the county board. Now, the Board of Zoning Appeals does not have the power to rezone property or to amend the regulations set forth in the ordinance. That authority rests solely with the county board. This board does have the authority to do 3 things. Number 1, we can approve use permits that allow modifications of placement requirements for structures on 1 and 2 family lots where there's no option in the zoning ordinance to allow such modifications. And number 2, we can grant variances from the specific requirements of the zoning ordinance. And third, we decide appeals of decisions of the zoning administrator. Now, when approving use permits, the Board of Zoning Appeals may impose conditions that we deem necessary in the public interest, including limiting the duration of the use permit. In order to approve a use permit, the law requires that the board find that the proposal meet conditions and that the use permit will not adversely affect the health or safety of persons residing in the neighborhood, will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood, and will not be in conflict with the purposes of the master plans and land use and zoning related policies of the county. Now, to do this, the BZA shall consider whether the modification will promote compatibility of development with the surrounding neighborhood because the structure's overall footprint, size, and placement are similar to the structures on the property surrounding the lot in question, and whether the modification will preserve natural landform, historical features, and/or significant trees and foliage. Now, when granting variances, the burden of proof is on the applicant to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that it meets the following criteria. The strict application of the terms of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, or granting the variance would alleviate a hardship due to a physical condition relating to the property or improvements thereon, or alleviate a hardship by granting a reasonable modification to a property or improvements requested on behalf of, by or on behalf of a person with disability, and the property for which the variance is being requested was acquired in good faith and any hardship was not created by the applicant, and that the variance granted will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and nearby properties in the proximity of the geographic area, and that the condition or situation of the property concerned is not of so general or recurring nature as to make reasonably practicable the adoption of an amendment to the ordinance, and that granting the variance will not result in a use that is not otherwise permitted on the property or change the zoning classification of the property, and that the relief or remedy obtained through the variance is not available through a special exception process as provided for under the zoning and/or subdivision ordinance. Now, when deciding appeals of the zoning administrator, this board must find that and use its judgment to determine if the administrator was correct. Now, this evening, cases will be called and a brief staff report and recommendation will be given. Following that, board members will ask questions of the staff, and next, applicants or representatives will be given an opportunity to make comments to support the application or appeal. Now, if you choose to make a comment, you must come forward to the podium so that your comments can be recorded for the record. Next, all speakers for the item will be called. Speakers must fill out a speaker slip, which is available on the table in the front of the room. And then, after we hear from speakers for and against the proposal, the board may permit the applicant a brief opportunity to clarify any points. The board may ask questions of any speakers, but does not permit and will not condone any cross-examination or direct questioning by others. We have deemed the following time limits for speakers to be sufficient: 20 minutes for appellants in appeals cases, and 5 minutes for applicants for use permits and variances. In all cases, speakers representing organizations shall have 3 minutes and individuals 2 minutes. Now, after the board has gathered all the information we need and have discussed the case, we'll decide the matter by voting on a motion which is duly made and seconded. A majority is needed to approve any motion. Any appeal from decisions of this board must be made to the circuit court in accordance with state law. After your case of interest is heard, you're welcome to stay for the balance of the session or leave at your convenience. And given how warm it is in this room at this time, I assume that we'll expect people to leave after they're through. Again, thank you for being here this evening, and I'd ask Mr. Rissy to please call the first case.
Case number V-11449-19-VA-1 is a variance request by Jarrett and Lori Taubman, the owners, to permit a maximum lot coverage of 51.7% instead of 48% as required for a one-family dwelling with qualifying front porch and rear detached garage in the R6 zoning district, or such alternative relief as the BZA may deem appropriate, such as grant of a variance permitting maximum lot coverage of greater than 48% but less than 51.7%, and or grant of alterations to other portions of the property consistent with section 15.64 of the zoning ordinance regarding the replacement of an existing deck in the R6 zoning district premise known as 1719 North Monroe Street. Staff recommends the board adopt the attached proposed resolution denying the variance. A proposed alternative resolution has been provided should the board see fit to approve the variance as advertised.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Rissy?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Owen?
the applicants have made an alternative proposal to have a variance that expires on December 31st, 2024, by which time they intend to have made modifications to their driveway to bring them within the by right coverage limitations. Does staff have any concerns with the enforceability of such an arrangement?
Staff does have concerns with the enforceability of any prolonged sunsetting approval, just because we don't have a mechanism to really check in on those sunsetting approvals once they're granted. It tends to be up to the BZA coordinator to remember when they're granted and look in on them, oftentimes years and sometimes after coordinators have left.
Okay.
Are there any other questions of staff? If not, be happy to hear from either Jarrett and or Lori Taubman. Welcome again.
Good evening. I'm Jarrett Taubman. This is my wife, Lori. Appreciate your time tonight. Our pending application, as you know, seeks a variance of section 3.2.5 of the ordinance, which limits the percentage of our lot that can be covered by various structures. As you'll recall, in April, the board heard testimony with respect to our application. As we demonstrated at the hearing and on the record, 51.7% of our lot is currently covered. This was permitted when our house was constructed in 2004, prior to the 2005 amendment of the ordinance. This relatively high lot coverage percentage is largely attributable to our long driveway, which alone covers almost 20% of our lot. The length of our driveway was necessitated by the unique characteristics of our lot, which is irregularly shaped and has a large tree in the front yard. We consequently demonstrate that we face significant hardship not faced by similarly situated property owners who enjoy much greater flexibility and would, for example, be able to replace their decks without implicating applicable lot coverage limits. And because the requested variance would relieve us from this hardship and provide us with that same degree of flexibility, grant of the variance is appropriate and indeed required under the statutory variance standard. After we made this showing at the hearing, the board deferred further consideration of our application and requested that we explore the feasibility of reducing the size of our driveway and thus our overall lot coverage to avoid the need or minimize the need for variance. We believe that the requested variance was and is appropriate and indeed required because it would alleviate a hardship due to a physical condition relating to the property or improvements thereon at the time of the effective date of the ordinance, the statutory standard. That said, because our primary goal is to identify a constructive solution that the board is willing to approve, we undertook the requested inquiry. As detailed in our recent submission for the record, we reached out to more than 20 area contractors that advertise driveway-related services. In short, the contractors we contacted were generally unable or unwilling to perform the work we requested, namely reducing the size of our existing driveway. And the limited feedback we received strongly suggests that the cost of that work would be unreasonably high if we were able to identify an appropriate contractor. We therefore do not think it is reasonable to expect us to hire a contractor to reduce the size of our driveway at this time, particularly as the driveway is still in good shape. However, we expect our driveway will need to be replaced by the end of 2024 as a matter of routine home maintenance, given the expected approximately 20-year life of a typical asphalt driveway. It would not be an undue economic burden for us to reduce the size of our driveway at that time when we replace it, particularly as we could budget for these costs. We respectfully suggest that if the board is unwilling to grant a variance without conditions, which we continue to believe would be the best and most reasonable outcome in our case, it would be appropriate for the board to grant the requested variance subject to the condition that we alter our driveway to reduce our overall lot coverage to the applicable limit by the end of 2024. This approach would allow us to replace our deck now, ensure that we incur significant costs a single time in an efficient manner near the driveway's expected end of life, instead of separately incurring significant costs for removing a portion of the driveway now and then replacing the remainder of the driveway in a few years, and it would facilitate our ability to install a driveway that is specifically designed to reflect the particular features of our property, ensure overall structural integrity, and comply with the applicable lot coverage limits. We note that Section 15.6.4 of the ordinance specifically provides that the board has authority to grant variance is subject to conditions of this type. We worked with county staff to ensure that the public notice of our application specifically stated that the board could grant alternative relief, including relief subject to conditions. Also note on the point of enforceability that, as you noted in the preamble, with respect to use permits, there are specific provisions for sunsetting of grants of flexibility. There are also other provisions within the zoning ordinance that provide for temporary structures to be erected. And as a general matter, there's an obvious need to enforce the provisions of the zoning ordinance. And it sort of baffles me that there's not a similar ability to put a reminder in your Outlook calendar and check at the end of the year in December that our driveway has been adjusted in an appropriate fashion. I would note as well that in a sense, this provision, if this condition is imposed, it will be self-enforcing in the sense that we will likely have to do this one way or the other, just as a matter of home maintenance. So obviously understand the need to check on this and make sure it's done, but we will have to do it. We'll have to, we have to apply for a permit. There are numerous opportunities to check and ensure that that we're compliant with the requirement, and we're bringing this forward in good faith and have every intention of satisfying the condition if it's imposed. With that, happy to try to answer any questions you may have, or otherwise address any concerns.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Taubman? If not, this matter is with the board. I'd be happy to entertain a motion. Let me add, for the benefit of the public, that Mr. Blake Bowen, the assistant to the zoning administrator, has joined us also.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Owen?
I think the applicant's alternative proposal is extremely reasonable. I think, we've recognized that we're getting a whole swath of these deck replacement situations, and I was trying to flip to the part of the statute that defines our parameters for variances, but I'm pretty sure that we have an explicit authority to put a time limit on a variance from the state legislature. I think that this is the kind of situation that they may have had in mind in doing that. I do think that I would note in response to one of the points that the applicants made, we're not supposed to grant variances that run counter to the general purposes of the zoning ordinance. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's pretty clear that the county board knew that it was going to, that it intended to have a widespread effect of reducing lot coverage mm-hmm. on homes that already exceeded the recent limits, the 2012 limits or 2009 limits, as they needed to be maintained or replaced and so forth, that was part of the overall scheme. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think the Board of Zoning Appeals should go around saying that entire scheme was unreasonable, and so we're going to eliminate it case by case. But here's a homeowner that's trying to take reasonable short-term measures to eventually come into compliance and just wants to do it via the driveway, the next round of the driveway replacement as opposed to the deck on the next round of deck replacement. And I just think that's extremely reasonable, and so I'm prepared to make a motion.
Ms. Malice, thank you very much, Ms. Darling.
Before making a motion,
there you go.
There we go. I guess I'm taking a different point of view on this one. It's clear that the county board had, as you say, an intention to limit lot coverage. I see the solution as legislative rather than a variance. And I think if we were to ask staff how many properties in Arlington currently meet this condition, where they have a deck that was built prior to the ordinance that exceeds current lot coverage, I think that there would be numerous instances. And so I'm not prepared to do this one by one. I would prefer that we hold the line and ask the board to make a legislative solution that could then be granted not just to this applicant but to all the other applicants, because this is not the first case that we've had like this, and I think we're going to see more of these. And so I think we as a board ought to be consistent in how we approach this, and as we have in other zoning issues, found that by being consistent, we actually did achieve a legislative remedy. So I'm not inclined to support it, even though I think that may be where the board ends up, but we're not the county board.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Melnick, thank you.
So I'm in agreement with Ms. Malice, because, the policy is when there are structures that are causing too much coverage, the policy is just to let them go, when they're going to go, and there are explicit provisions about when they can be rebuilt. There's a whole listing here in the staff report, the force majeure, that sort of thing. And I do think it would set a bad precedent to, when somebody wants to say replace a deck, and then condition on something else on the property, like a driveway deteriorating, because then, first of all, are there going to be limits on what else needs to deteriorate on the property that's covering, and are there going to be standards that we're going to set as to the time limit for the deterioration of something else on the lot? So it just seems like, as Ms. Malice said, I'm sure there's a lot of properties like this, and I just think after a while, we're just going to come to a place where we're just like, what do we do? How do we have consistent decisions here? So, in light of that, and the precedent it would set, and here, having heard the applicants, I'm sympathetic to your plight with this deck, but I feel like I need to stick with the written policy of the county.
Thank you, Mr. Melnick. Ms. Freshman?
Well, just to make things interesting, I don't object to the solution, the 5-year solution. although I can see where monitoring it is a challenge, and even though it's not your intention, there might be somebody else there in 5 years. So I think it gets even more confusing. And actually, I think when the board makes a change to the zoning ordinance, it usually creates significant numbers of problems, like in this property, but they're all different, or they're variations on a theme. And frankly, I think this one is unusual enough so that I would not have any trouble with it, with the original request. But I can certainly go along with their suggestion for some sort of a sunset.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Owen?
I just would say that I greatly respect Mr. Melnick and Ms. Malice and their views. I think that they have perfectly reasonable stance on this. I guess I would say that I think 5 years happens to be the length of the term of a BZA member. So I think it counts as living memory to do 5 years. I think I agree that if we wind up doing, 30 of these a year, then we won't have been doing our job. But I think my thinking is in line with Ms. Freshman's, that a relatively short-term extension for some properties that can pull a maneuver like this, they're asking basically for I would say, a short-term delay in the impact on their property of the new zoning ordinance, so that a different piece of their rationale is so that a different piece of their property can decay and not be replaced. And I think the motion I will make won't even reference the driveway or the deck. The motion that I will make simply has a time limit and a more general rationale for the time limit. And that way it's not going to be on staff or a future owner to decide who said what about a deck and who said what about a driveway.
Right.
It just says you've got an extra 5 years to work this out. And if you don't, the variance expires and you're back where you started.
Yep.
So I can, for purposes of discussion, I'm happy to go ahead and make the motion.
I'd like to hear it.
And I'll take it right now.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the proposed alternative resolution approval as advertised with an additional whereas clause and an additional condition. The additional whereas clause would be, whereas the applicants have represented that they intend to make modifications on the property prior to December 31st, 2024 to reduce overall coverage below 48%. And then a new condition number 4, this variance will expire on December 31st, 2024.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Mr. Owen and seconded by Ms. Freshman to adopt the alternative resolution with modifications with respect to the length of the variance. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Ms. Malice?
So what happens in 5 years if this property is not in compliance?
I think that's a good
I think
question
that's
for
a staff
staff,
question.
but I would say two situations. One, no complaint is made, and the second is that someone files a complaint with the zoning office. So those would be two scenarios.
No, my question is, let's say there's
Enforcement, you mean?
there's nothing happened, and what's the enforcement? Given this, what would be the enforcement? That staff would come in and rip out the deck? I'm trying to understand where we're going.
I don't think staff would be the ones ripping out the deck, but in theory, zoning enforcement could go out, inform the homeowners that they are in violation of the zoning ordinance and need to come into compliance in some way. They could apply to the BZA at that time. As you said, 5 years is someone's term, so things could change in 5 years here. Or they could at that time modify the driveway or any other structure that would get them to the allowable coverage.
And how, are subsequent owners informed of the variance and the clock on it?
I honestly don't know that a prospective homeowner would be aware of the variance unless they were very good at researching their investment.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Owen?
So we have another item on this very same agenda where somebody has rebuilt a deck without getting a variance that they should have needed. So they're already in that situation where they're under presumably an enforcement action, probably, right?
That situation is a bit different, but yes.
But that's not an unusual kind of enforcement
The seller
situation.
disclosed it.
Right. But we have, I believe, on at least one other occasion that I can remember, added a condition that requires the applicant to submit proof to the zoning administrator that they have recorded the variance so as to notify a future owner or the use permit. I can't remember whether it was a variance or use permit. So if that's a concern, I'm absolutely open to such a condition.
It doesn't change my view in terms of how I would proceed on this, but it might offer some protection to someone down the road.
Well, you don't have to support the ultimate motion to make an amendment to do that. You can do both. You can amend it and then still vote against it.
And Ms. Malice's question is, I think, well placed. I'm not a real estate agent. I don't know how they go about informing their clients, either seller or buyer, about any clouds over title or possible encumbrances or restrictions on the use of the property. I know the questions I would ask a real estate agent, and I know they'd be required to answer those. But I too have. I support, I think, what is a reasonable alternative of the Taubmans, but and thankfully Mr. Owen has put it forward, Ms. Freshman has. But I too am curious about how perhaps the Taubmans might envision ensuring that their property doesn't go out of compliance, doesn't become in violation after in the beginning of 2025.
I guess, I'd say, we came to you in good faith throughout this whole process. We applied for the applicable permits for our deck, even though we're just replacing it in the same footprint. So, we're not in a situation where we, replace the deck without getting the permits. And so I just feel like, I hate to say just trust us, but I feel like we've been pretty forthcoming and forthright throughout this process.
The other thing I would note on this point, I think we're happy to take whatever reasonable measures you think are appropriate to provide notice, but to the extent we did not, and this were, material impediment on our property or, limitation to use, if we were to fail to disclose that, we might be opening ourselves up to liability. So we have every incentive to do that and to make sure that any future owner is aware. And with that said, we have no plans to sell the property, so.
And
I agree,
when you
Ms.
Google
Calvin.
our address, a bunch comes up from this.
Unfortunately,
or at least my
I think
name now.
I think we had some discussion about there isn't a real tickler system, and we don't set agendas that far out such that there would be, an internal notice. Unfortunately, it would seem, as you suggest, that such a thing would be in place because we have actually made similar kinds of conditions in the past. We had a case where there was an outbuilding that we said had to be removed after a certain period of time. And in that case, the person came at the end of that period of time seeking to have that earlier decision changed such that they could retain it, which we didn't allow. I think you have been upfront and have operated totally in good faith, so there's no question about that. It's not that there's distrust. It's I guess, for lack of a better, it's government and
Process.
Yep.
and kind of process. It's not that we're fiduciaries, but in a sense, we do have an obligation to ensure that what we do is enforceable. Ms. Freshman.
I would support a condition on recording it, however that works legally, which I don't know, rather than relying on you or having the burden on you, or certainly on a Realtor to disclose it.
So let's, you seconded the motion. Mr. Owen, I think, I see his pen working, is probably working on some language to create just that condition.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Owen?
I'd ask unanimous consent to add a condition number 5 to the motion. Applicant agrees to provide the zoning administrator with evidence that this variance has been recorded with the land title records prior to issuance of the building permit.
Agreed.
Hearing no objection to that amendment by unanimous consent, it is so made.
Could it be read one more time?
Go ahead, Mr. Owen.
Yeah, and I would welcome any rephrasing.
Okay.
That might be better, but what I came up with was applicant agrees to provide the zoning administrator with evidence that this variance has been recorded with the land title records prior to issuance of the building permit.
Okay.
For the
So
deck.
they'll need an original, because original documents need to be recorded. And the only thing is, how, like if you did anything to it, if you sold the property, then how it would, be satisfied or released. It seems to me then they'd have to have like another study about, to make sure it's in compliance and so forth, if they did anything to the property, but that's another thing.
Yeah, I don't know that this solves the tickler issue. I think my view is that the state legislature gives zoning, boards of zoning appeals the authority to put time limits on use permits and variances. And administratively, it's sort of our responsibility to make sure we do that in, there's an expectation that we will do that from time to time. And so I think the government has the local government somehow has the responsibility to figure out an infrastructure that will create to do that. Maybe this should go on our list of BZA administrative questions that we've been asking.
Whether in the tax records or certainly in the, I think the easiest universally, is the land use records because that's, notice to the public.
Right. And I think that anyone who's getting a mortgage loan and gets title insurance, this will pop up. Yep. So most buyers will then be on notice of what the encumbrance.
I think there probably should be a time limit on getting it recorded.
It would be prior to the issuance of the use permit.
Okay.
In my terms.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, prior to the issuance of the building permit. So they couldn't
Okay.
start building until they had proved to the zoning administrator they had done it.
Yeah, so just for the record, I'd be willing to support this just with these conditions, and that's because of the unusual nature, the driveway, and the usual nature of the deck and the supporting pillar in the middle and the time limit in the recording. But hopefully this is a rare circumstance.
I agree that this is not a typical rear deck situation, even though we've faced several of them.
So, Mr. Owen, if I could hear, for the record, the additional language.
Oh, you want me to read the additional language?
Repeat that additional language, just for the record, so that we're clear.
Additional whereas clause, whereas the applicants have represented that they intend to make modifications on the property prior to December 31st, 2024 to reduce overall coverage below 48%. And new condition number 4, this variance will expire on December 31st, 2024. And new condition number 5, the applicants agree to provide the zoning administrator with evidence that this variance has been recorded with the land title records prior to the issuance of the building permit.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Such motion has been made and properly seconded. Any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Chair, so did you say land title records?
Yes.
I did. I don't know if that's the best phrase to use.
Yeah, I think just the land records of Arlington County,
It's
Virginia.
sufficient.
Land records of Arlington
I think
County.
that's actually what they're titled.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would ask unanimous consent to so modify the motion.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. And the Tubmans, you understand, it's your request. So Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
And by a 4-1 vote, the ayes have it, and the matter is adopted as amended. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rissy, if you would call the next case.
Case number V-1146-19-UP-1 is a use permit request by Cheryl Takamoto and James Scampavia, the owners, to permit a rear setback of 17 feet to the wall of an enclosed sunroom and unenclosed deck, 16.6 feet to the sunroom's eave instead of 25 feet to the wall of the sunroom and 21 feet to deck and sunroom eave as required from the rear lot line, regarding a proposed elevated enclosed sunroom and unenclosed deck over lower deck in the R6 zoning district on a premise known as 901 North Montana Street. Staff recommends that the board adopt the proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Rissy?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Owen?
In the April 15th, 2019 letter from the applicant, it states in the 6th paragraph, he, meaning our neighbor and back and below us, does not object to our project, and we have attached his written documentation of support. However, there does not appear to be a letter of support from the rear neighbor at 900 North Madison Street, and the staff report summary suggests that there was no feedback from this resident. Are we missing a letter of support from this most affected neighbor? If there is, are we? Well, that's the first question. Are we missing a letter of support?
Not that staff has received.
Okay. And then I'll have a second question for the applicant.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Rissy? If not, Ms. Takamoto and Mr. Scampavia, anything to add, especially with respect to this question of
Sure.
support?
To answer the question, the owner of the property lives out of state, and he's very difficult to get a hold of. And so we did communicate, and he had indicated a positive. He did send us a letter where he said basically, or an email where he basically didn't object, but he asked us for a quid pro quo, where he said, I approve, I don't object to the sunroom for any other reasons, but if I do something, you'll support me. And that created kind of a legal. I just didn't know how to respond.
The letter says.
But I do have it, and he.
The letter says that if we allow him to excavate and build up to our joint property line, he will sign the letter. And so we just slowly backed away and said, I don't think we'd better sign this because we have no idea what he's going to do.
Yeah.
I did speak to Mr.
Turn the mic a little bit towards
Okay.
you, Ms. Takamoto.
I've been in touch with the Planning Commission and Mr. Rizzo throughout, and I just want to commend the staff for being so easy to work with. I'm so intimidated by doing this. And I said, about that letter, we just, we started doing it, but we didn't. And then Mr. Rizzo also said, and I said, and I looked at all the other ones, and they all had these petitions. So I said, do I need to go get that? And he goes, you might want to go do that. So we have here the letter from, the unsigned letter from our neighbor, as well as a petition from our neighbors, including not the owner, but the tenants. It's half a mile to walk to that thing, but I walked last night, and the neighbors are all happy. They said, we don't care. Go ahead, build it. So we have their signature here, and I can present it
Please,
to who?
either way.
And just about this. When we moved, I just always loved that deck in the back. It's just the best thing, except it's hot, sunny in the summer, and then the skeeters come and start biting me. So I just want to go and enjoy my little deck. There's also a letter from Mark Tropey, who was in charge of our neighborhood redevelopment, and he says, we see him all the time. He comes, walks by our house and says, hey, will you write a letter because you put a picture of our house in your little neighborhood improvement plan? And he said, sure.
I would just add that over the years with the owner, when he has been in town and stuff, we've always, worked well. So there's no mean, we would obviously support our neighbors reasonably, but this just seemed a little extreme, and I just, from a legal perspective, it just didn't seem appropriate. But did demonstrate we did communicate, and he had no objections.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It was extreme. That would be my view too. And Mr. Rissy would probably not be as nice to them seeking to build up to the property line as he was with you. And that would not be something that would be favorably received by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
we thought
anyway.
so as well.
Yeah, and I think, needless to say, signing that would not have been advisable.
We concur with the, without exception, to the recommendations from staff.
Any further questions of the applicant? Not, I'd be happy to entertain a motion then.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Freshman first.
I move the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution approving the use permit V-11466-19-UP1, subject to the conditions listed.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been moved by Ms. Freshman, seconded by Ms. Malice, that we approve the subject use permit with the conditions as described in the staff report. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, could you clarify who made and seconded the motion?
Ms. Freshman made the motion and Ms. Malice seconded the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This is
Thank you very much, and good luck.
for the record.
Please call the next case.
Case number V-11467-19-VA-2 is a variance request by Michael and Lena Anderson, the owners, for after-the-fact approval to permit a main building footprint of 3,456 square feet instead of 2,800 square feet as required, and to permit a main building footprint coverage of 29% instead of 25% as required, regarding previous construction of a non-conforming replacement rear deck in the R8 zoning district on the premise known as 2901 North Kensington Street. Staff recommends that the board adopt the proposed resolution denying the variance. Two proposed alternative resolutions have been provided should the board see fit to approve the variance as advertised or as modified approval with reduced deck. And I'd like to please note that there is supplemental material for this case that came in after the application packet was assembled and printed. There's an additional letter of support from an adjacent neighbor.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Rissy?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Owen?
does staff support or oppose the proposed alternative resolution 2?
Well, I think that staff's proposal is for the denial, so I wouldn't say that we necessarily have a position either. I wouldn't say that we have a position supporting it.
You don't need it's just
Okay.
original of what you.
Proposed resolution 2 seems to list the same square footage, 3,456, and coverage 29% as resolution number 1. It struck me that since proposal 2 is for a smaller deck, that it ought to have a different square footage than proposal number 1. Is there a reason for the lack of discrepancy between the square footage and percentage for the two motions?
I just didn't have a number in front of me and wasn't able to easily calculate that number to put into that motion. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Is staff, it wasn't clear to me whether or not there was part of the applicant's proposal included water runoff mitigation. Does staff have an understanding of whether or not additional water runoff mitigation has been proposed by the applicant?
Just in staff's discussions with the applicant, I don't believe that there's additional proposed mitigation. I believe the applicant is describing the current condition of the rear yard and the mitigation that is currently occupying space in that yard.
Okay. There seem to be also, some discrepancies for how the calculation was made for the limits for the main building coverage. I couldn't tell whether it was done based on limits for houses without a front porch or with a front porch. And so I just would clarify, does staff consider this parcel to have a front porch?
Staff does not consider this parcel to have a qualifying front porch. To get more technical, could you flip to the front picture of the house? To
There's no
be
porch.
a porch, our definition requires columns, which are missing from the current structure.
So if they added columns, could they get an
Just
additional?
freestanding columns, like Rome?
Well, I do not believe they could be freestanding, but
Okay.
I believe the definition says columns supporting a roof. So if the columns were put in place such that they supported the roof, I do believe the applicant would be able to access additional 3% as well as some number 100 square feet.
All right, and proposal number 2 would bring them down to 29%? No, 28%. So could they be by right under proposal number 2 plus some columns in the front?
Literally, are you saying that if they build a front porch,
No.
the issue goes away?
I'm saying they can add, yes, I'm saying that it seems to me that maybe if they reduce the deck as they have proposed and they put 2 sticks under their eave in front of their front door, that then they might be by right.
I do not believe that the columns would totally mitigate the need for the variance.
May I
Because?
introduce a comment at this stage?
Not quite.
Not
It
quite
just
yet.
takes it down 1%.
Because I've made the
right?
calculations on that scenario.
All
so
right,
that's why.
well, very soon.
Thank you.
I believe that it would bring it considerably closer, but would not completely eliminate the need for it. I tried running numbers, and I am a bit unsure how the current numbers that are being used, whether that includes the area underneath the front entry roof or not. So there is a possibility that the addition of the columns, in addition to increasing the available main building footprint coverage, lot coverage, etc., would also add an additional 129 square feet of coverage for that porch, which would then therefore need to be included in that number.
Got it. Thank you.
So it could be a zero-sum game.
Well, not
It
quite
wouldn't
zero.
be zero, but less than the full 3%.
Gotcha. But some gain.
Yes.
Some reduction in coverage.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Any further questions of staff? If not, Mr. Anderson, welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to be
We're
here.
familiar with this property, as you well know.
Yes. I've sent a presentation, if I may have that pulled up. So, quick background, we can move to the next page. We're Swedish natives and just became permanent residents, and we're about to buy a house. And we're about to close on this property. My wife and I are 2 children, and unfortunately we found out about this issue. So I actually attended the previous hearing, and it was very instructive. We still decided to buy this property despite the outcome for a number of reasons. The first one is we needed somewhere to live. And secondly, I felt after being at the hearing that there should be an alternative path, and hence that's why I bring this forward. So thank you for having me here. Again, we've closed on the house April 12th, so time was of essence because there was a potential enforcement. Mr. Reese has been very helpful in educating me in the process. So I filed an application the same day, basically, and hence the initial documentation is so in detail, but the documentation has evolved as we speak, and my strategy too. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about that I think is new from the previous application. So next slide, please. Again, I think we're taking a different approach. The previous application or applicant just basically proposed to approve the current deck the way it is. I think it's fair to assess alternatives, such as a reduction that I presented in the package. And also, when I look at the original design of the house, and this comes back to the unreasonable limitation and burden. When you look at the structure, the main structure of the building, it's clearly designed in that way to have a deck in that position, as maybe compared to some other properties where you attach a deck, and I'll show you the drawing in more detail. Again, the proposed redesign and reduction of the deck will take it down to 110 square feet, and in my view, provide a healthy margin to the total lot coverage. It will be at 32.5%. Which I think should be a significant factor in the decision. Another thing that I found out that I didn't know and wasn't really presented in the first application was the existence of the riverbed to mitigate stormwater, and that also covers a quite big part of the property, which I will show briefly. And also, again, adjacent properties, and I will show that as well, has similar designs, similar decks. And another thing that's new, I think, in this application is I have full support from all the impacted neighbors. There was one in particular that was not covered, the previous submittal, and I also believe that there was some level of controversy with that particular neighbor, and I now have their full support for this application. And that's documented fully. Next slide, please. So just to provide some context, this is the neighborhood. These are the houses, and next slide, please. The red circle shows our property, and I think it's important because it indicates how the profile of the footprint of the house that was designed and built in 1969 compared to what's built after the new zoning requirements. So you can clearly see the difference in the appearance. And I want to show the backyards of the two closest houses there as well. Next slide, please. There's one of the decks, and there's the other side, the other building, and there, that deck. So this is a typical appearance in the neighborhood, and so the deck we have in the pictures you saw is not extreme by any means. It's actually quite small compared to what you see there. And this is actually the view from one of the backyards. If you go as far back as you possibly can, this is what you see by our deck, and from the other property you don't see anything. So next slide, please. Here is the drawing, and it's in your package, of the existing design of the deck, and my proposal is to sort of follow the main structures, and here I think you can see it's clearly designed to have something in that place. It's with the deck and the doors, it's designed originally for the deck. And my proposal, it may not be obvious when you look at the drawing, is to follow the main structure, basically reduce it in that with that strategy. Next slide, please. So here it is. And I want to point out that unfortunately there is a typo in the drawing that made it to the staff report, where it says that the area that's reduced, that says 99 square feet, it says 7.5 in the package. It's a typo. It's just what happens when you do this in the middle of the night, unfortunately. Life on the job, too. So just a correction there, it's actually 99 square feet.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Owen?
If I could just ask for clarification on this slide. The commas indicate decimals, right? So those are not feet and inches, those are feet and tenths of feet?
It's correct. Okay. So they're converted to tenths of feet, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I had to work on that because I'm in the metric system originally. It's a challenge.
It's only a challenge for us, who, unlike the rest of the world, go by this odd system.
So that means, according to my calculation, by also removing the stair, which indicates 7.5 square feet, would give a total reduction of 38%, which I hope shows an initiative to be in compliance or get it closer to compliance. Neighborhood outreach, I mentioned that. I had all impacted. Next slide, please. I've circled those properties that are impacted. Actually, the one across the street does not really have any impact at all. It was a recommendation from staff to just cover that, just to be on the safe side, and so that's the last letter I included. I think that was the final comments. Yes.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the applicant?
Mr.
Mr. Owen?
Chairman. So how many, can you state again how many fewer square feet you would have under your alternative proposal?
It would be, if I correct, 116.5. Is that the correct math? No, sorry, 106.5.
106.
106.5, correct.
So we would want to subtract that from the number in alternative resolution 2 were we to adopt that.
3349.
And then the total lot size difference percentage would be
32.5
denominator?
according to my calculation on the
So
total
again-
coverage.
total coverage would be what percent?
32.5.
32 total coverage.
No. Yes, correct. Yes. Total coverage.
And then is there a difference between total and main building in this one?
Yes, driveway.
So what would be the main, and on the total is already under the limit anyway, right?
Yes.
So what would be the main building footprint coverage percent with your modification?
So
I thought I said 28.
with the initial discussion that was we just had about adding the pillars and getting into the other category of 28%, the coverage would be 28.4 with the reduction and, yeah,
So you'd still be 0.4% over.
0.4, yes. Correct. But fairly close.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that number? What is the, right now, the footprint is 25 is allowed, and what would it be?
$32
32.5?
with those reductions? That's what it would be.
No, I believe total footprint is,
Didn't you say 28?
I thought you said 24.5.
so there's two
After the porch.
requirements. One is
Porch.
main building and the other is total. The limit with a front porch for total lot coverage is 38, I believe. Is that right?
Sorry, with a front porch?
With front porch, total lot coverage is 38, is that right?
In the R8 zoning district, that is correct.
Okay, and the applicant would have what coverage total with the modification?
32.5.
So you'd be well under the total lot coverage.
Correct.
So
Oh, yeah,
you're-
absolutely.
You're by right with respect to total lot coverage.
Correct.
So the only thing we're talking about is a variance for the main building footprint, which goes up to 28% if the applicant has a qualifying front porch. And the applicant is suggesting that the applicant's proposal would be 28.4%.
Correct.
So 0.4%
That's
above the 28.
with the porch modification in
Yeah.
front?
That's with a porch modification
Yeah.
to move to a qualifying front porch.
And how does the applicant feel about that?
And staff is saying it might actually be more than that if the result of adding the columns adds the front porches 100 feet back to the,
Numbers.
right? So basically,
It's a wash.
it's the same as the original. They would take out of the back what they're adding to the front, but in the meantime, they'd be adding 3 times as much allowance because they would be adding a front porch.
And the applicant is okay with making modifications to the front of the house?
Absolutely.
They're relatively minor.
Doesn't
Yes.
look like there's a choice.
So we're within a 1%?
It appears so.
So which of the
Well, it could be as,
motions?
I mean, what is it what's the total lot coverage? Or the total lot size?
11,760 square feet.
So it might be as much as a little over 1% difference for main building footprint coverage if you're adding back in the front porch. So that would be the worst case scenario. I would say, yeah, I have some views, but I'll defer to my more senior in-service colleagues.
Who is that?
Who's that?
Any further discussion? Any further questions of the applicant?
So, Mr. Chairman, is this
Smells?
proposal all outlined in alternative 2? Including
I think
Not the numbers.
without
Not
the
the porch is not,
don't, no, let's look at it.
Mr. Rizzi has a comment.
Mr. Rissy, go ahead, please.
I'll try and answer that. The alternative proposed resolution 2 did not make modifications to the requested coverage, but did add the condition that the deck be reduced according to the plan submitted by the applicant. It also did not include an additional condition for the columns, so that would need to be added tonight.
Okay, let's see. Therefore, the applicant agrees that the deck straight will be reduced in accordance with the footprint.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Owen?
So I'll go ahead and express my views now. I think this one seems best suited for a deferral.
So that we can get a plan with the porch on it, drawn out, the numbers clarified.
I think best case scenario is that the applicant and staff figure out a way to do this by right that's satisfactory to the applicant and that staff uses qualifying. So I don't know if there's further redesign to the front and back that somehow would be satisfactory to the applicant. But I think, in the previous item, we alluded to how much we struggle with these back porch
Right.
situations.
Right.
And we have already denied this very property less than a year ago.
Right.
Months ago.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
couple months ago. Yeah.
So best case scenario is that with some additional time, and it sounds like the applicant's immediate interest is avoiding some kind of enforcement action.
Right.
So if the applicant wants a lengthy deferral to go at a leisurely pace and explore different options and talk it over and not spoil your summer vacation with racing to a July BZA meeting, I'd be happy.
Or with construction going on during the summer.
Yeah, I would just say, why not take till September or some other time that the applicant would prefer to explore other options and see if by right is possible, and if not, to come back with cleaner numbers that staff better understands and can evaluate.
If they have to come back.
If they have to come back at all.
The goal would be if you can craft a proposal that requires you not to come back at all.
Of course. This is all evolved very quickly with the front porch. That's something probably I should consider earlier, but I've investigated myself. My preference would be if we could get to a resolution with that front porch addition as well, because that way I can move on and actually go to vacation and summer break at ease too, because I've been spending a lot of time researching, preparing this case for today's hearing. So at some point you prefer to move on. So if that would be an option for you to consider, I would appreciate that.
I would say, Mr. Chairman, there's a heavy presumption of denial here because we just denied it.
Yeah, we did just denied it once.
And so, you're a new owner, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I'd be happy to give you all the time you need to, not maybe all the time you need, but plenty of time.
Certainly several months, anyway.
If that's what would be helpful to you, to think it over and explore other options. And if turns out you can figure out something where you don't even need a variance, you don't even have to show up. You can just withdraw it. And we typically just accept the withdrawal. So I assume that alternative will have to bring it down to 28%. That's right. And I doubt that might be even possible. Well, not with your current proposal exactly. I don't know if it even makes it if I take the full deck away. That's my main concern. Oh, I think so. I think the possibility that we're suggesting you take a leisurely time to explore is by adding 2 columns. It seems preliminarily on the limited information we have tonight that suddenly you gain an extra 200 square feet that you didn't already have. Yeah. Right? Okay. And so that that potentially might be enough for you to find a deck that works for you. Yeah.
Ms. Freshman?
Are we facing an enforcement action here or just anticipating it? I mean, is he under the gun at this point, or?
The filing of
If we-
the filing of the variance has stayed the enforcement.
Okay, so if we, for example, do defer it to September, which allows him to come up with one or two options, maybe, ideally, a by right option, and then you simply withdraw, and we bless that withdrawal in September. If not, but the changes are very slightly over what's permitted, that would be a good faith effort that I think we could support. Okay. So I think that it's in your best interest to, and you want to do it nicely. You don't want to just throw something on the front that's going to look awful because the numbers work.
Yeah.
So I think that that is a reasonable suggestion. And as we say, if you can avoid coming back altogether, that's good for everybody. But if you can't, if the changes are much more modest and you've made that effort, that I think is a very good solution.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Owen?
I would just caution the applicant that based on previous conversation on this project as well as what I heard earlier, I'm not sure you have 3 votes for any variance. So don't assume that even the tiniest extension is necessarily going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you should really work your hardest to try and figure out if there's a by right option for you, because I'm not sure I can count to 3 based on what I've heard so far. Maybe my other colleagues will weigh in and say differently, but I wouldn't want you to have unrealistic expectations.
Just so I understand your statement
Well,
correctly.
if you're very close, you've got 2. Then the third might be the, but I would urge you to really listen to what Mr. Owen suggested in terms of trying to bring it in within the, try to get under that 28%. That might mean contouring the deck slightly.
Sure.
But I think Mr. Owen's point is well taken, that it doesn't guarantee a third vote.
Motion?
But it would be persuasive, I would think.
Motion?
But I would be, you do have the right to have this decided up or down tonight. It would not be favorable, though, I don't think.
No, if it's unfavorable, I'd rather take the option to consider alternatives.
Okay.
Absolutely. With respect to delaying any enforcement, that will be a given with postpone or coming back in September.
It's still,
That would be
Mr.
my only
Apparently.
concern.
I would like to add a layer of complexity to this, that it is not only an enforcement issue with zoning currently. It actually came to zoning because it's being enforced in the building inspection side. This originally came up because there was a building permit and this work was not included on that. The building inspector inspecting the interior renovation that was permitted noticed did the work. And so building inspections is likewise trying to go through an enforcement process on this. They have thus far gone with us and extended their enforcement contingent on hearing from you guys. Zoning obviously will hold off on doing anything, but I can't speak for them and their timeframes.
I certainly hope that the building, and for something like this, which is not obviously not a safety issue.
Well, what action did they take? Let's clarify that.
It was not part of the building.
No, it's not, the permits office?
they were doing interiors and that guy cited them.
Okay. And that said that there could be, that they were in violation of the ordinance. But if they're doing interior modifications, he cited something that was really outside of what they were doing on the interior. What effect did that have on did they have a cease and desist on the interior work because of that?
I don't believe they held up the interior building permit, though.
Is that what HIT did? Not you,
So they didn't deny,
HIT did
they
that.
didn't,
The previous owner.
The only thing I am aware at this stage is I have been contacted by the building permits inspector who visited the site, and we had this conversation. They have questions about certain parameters of the design, which obviously will have to be addressed following a zoning approval, or if we can find a solution without a variance. So we are aware of that. So that will be the obvious next step.
Are you living in the house now?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any other building permit issues that you're aware of?
No.
Other than the deck issue?
This is the only one.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think so far we only had one conversation, but it was a very reasonable discussion. They were unaware of this hearing coming up, so they said they would await the outcome from this hearing. And with the direction I think we're talking about now, seems like they're probably going to be listening to that as well, be accommodating.
Ms. Freshman?
Motion?
Yeah, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to take one, and we'll have any further discussion, we'll take it up during the period of discussion.
On the matter of V-11467-19-UVA2, I move deferral to September 18, 2014 BZA.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Freshman and seconded by Mr. Owen to defer this matter to the September meeting of the BZA. Any further discussion? Ms. Malice? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Good luck, Mr. Anderson, in trying to work this out. And if not, still be happy to see you in September.
And Mr. Chairman, I think I hope the record will reflect that the purpose of the deferral was to allow the applicant more time to seek a by right option.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank
It's
you.
a good conversation.
Thank
Thank
you for
you.
preparation.
Yep.
It was a very helpful presentation. Thank you for putting the time into it.
Please call the next case.
Case number V-11468-19-UP-1 is a use permit request by Robert T. and Anita C. Doyle, the owners, to permit a rear setback of 20.9 feet to the wall of the addition, 19.9 feet to the eave, and 17.4 feet to the landing deck, instead of 25 feet to the wall, 21 feet to the eave and landing deck as required from the rear property line, regarding a new two-story rear addition over basement and rear deck in the R6 zoning district on the premise known as 5019 6th Street North. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Rissy? Hearing none. Robert or Anita Doyle? Anything you want to add? Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, and thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you also to Mr. Risi and Mr. Hamala for making this process very simple for me. It was pretty daunting when we first started this project. It almost killed it a couple of times. So I hope I present you something that's one of the more simple things on the agenda tonight. I have gone over our request, and we do feel that there's a minor hardship with the property in that it is set back further towards the rear fence than almost every other house in the entire neighborhood by approximately 9 feet. This limits our ability to build into the backyard, and it going over with the architect our options, it is an unreasonable expectation, we feel, cost-wise at least, to destroy the front of the house and sort of build some sort of Frankenstein structure, as she termed it in the process there. I have gone and talked to all of the neighbors, affected and unaffected, as it were, have letters of support from 3 of them who are immediately adjacent and behind the property, and they have all expressed their full support in writing. And I've also talked to all of the other neighbors. I've lived on this street for 13 years, so I know everyone pretty well, and they've all been quite supportive as well.
good, thank you. Any questions of the applicant? If not, I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Malice?
sorry.
Sorry, Paul, but I saw Ms. Malice.
Okay.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution approving use permit V-11468-19-UP-1, subject to the conditions listed.
There a second? Second. Been moved by Ms. Malice, seconded by Ms. Freshman to adopt the attached resolution in this case. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying all. Aye. Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, and the matter is adopted.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Please call the next case, Mr. Rissy.
Case number V-11469-19-UP-1 is a use permit request by Ashgar Shashmarardi and Miriam Amirian, the owners, to permit a setback of 2.6 feet to the wall, 1.6 feet to the eave from the left side property line instead of 8 feet to the wall, 5 feet to the eave as required, regarding the partial enclosure of an existing attached carport in the Maywood Historic District in the R6 zoning district on the premise known as 2337 North Fillmore Street. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions. And I'd like you to please note that there is supplemental material for this case that came in after the application packet was assembled and printed. It is from the applicant, and it is stating the addresses of those who have signed in support of his application.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Rissy?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Melnick?
As sometimes happens, I noticed that the application and also the disclosure are deficient. So in the one, let me see. Let's see, one moment. So in the application, nothing's checked about owner, occupant, or contract owner.
Right.
It does say at the bottom owner's name, but you know, the relationship, you know, is just uncertain. But also on the disclosure, the owners, the individual owners aren't listed at all under paragraph 3. It looks like only lenders are. And let's see, also the notary, you know, just for the record, it doesn't state where it was notarized. I see it's a District of Columbia notary. But that, I just noticed, you know, the county's not filled in on that.
Oh,
But
Yeah.
this is all blank.
Okay.
so, and I guess it's just a judgment as to whether or not, you know, these deficiencies, you know, whether we can hear it on account of that.
Yeah, how can it be perfected and or corrected? We'll get to this. Thanks for pointing that out. When the applicant has an opportunity, we'll get to the bottom of some of this. As to what their status is with respect to ownership or the like.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of the staff? Ms. Freshman?
Maybe this is not timely, but given that it's a historic district and it says HALRB has some conditions on the property, I wondered if that should be a condition when we get to the point of an approval. You can think about it.
They've actually made you guys a condition of their approval, so.
Well, that's why I think, you know, since they made a point of it, that we should have a condition to that effect if we get there.
Oh, that's kind of odd. Let's see here. Their first condition is approval by us. This is the Historic Affairs and Landmark Review Board. Their second condition is the subsequent approval of construction drawings by the
The Design Review Committee.
And the
HALRB.
HALRB again. And then changing the post detail, the third, changing the post detail depicted on the proposed first floor plan. Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Malice.
Are the drawings likely to change after
That
this approval?
was my concern, it sounds like, because there's going to be, well, maybe the DRCH ALRB is wondering if they're going to change by virtue of any action we take, and then they'll look at them again. Is that what it?
Well, subsequent approval of, these would be the only drawings that
Yeah.
would be
but-
given to them at this point.
Well, unless after this process of the BZA, the drawings change.
Yeah, we asked them to change it for
Yeah.
some
Oh,
reason.
we asked
And
them
then,
to change.
and then HLLB would have to
Have to look at them
at the
again.
new ones.
Got it.
So I guess they're conditioning their approval based on the, us not doing any changes.
Any
And if there are any
assumption that-
changes,
yeah.
then they have to look at it again. Then, well, we wouldn't have to look at it after that, because they would be determining whether based on now what the BZA has allowed them, whether that would satisfy their requirements.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Malice?
Mr. Ricci, are you in communication with HLRB on this project?
I'm in communication with the county staff who works with them, yes.
Okay. So is what we just described correct, that
I believe that they are expecting a refined set of construction documents that they will be approving regardless of whether any changes are made here.
there's different drawings coming from the applicant to
I wouldn't say different, I would say refined.
refine?
Just like you typically approve a set of plans before a building permit is issued, so too, this set of plans is not the one that would get the permit and is not the one that would pass them. They are expecting the construction drawings.
Gotcha. Construction drawings, they're expecting.
Yeah.
After what we do, then they'll have to go back to their architect or whomever to prepare those drawings and then give them back to the,
Yeah, they're looking at you to approve the
The
setback.
limits of
Yeah, and they want to
construction.
approve any final detailing and such.
So we don't have to address the depth of the post. That sort of thing.
gotcha.
If there were changes to the post detailing, and I've talked to other staff and the applicant, that were substantive to the request, then it would need to come back to you. But if they were decorative or
Let's try not to
interior,
do that.
yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. Be happy to hear from the applicants, either Ashgar and/or Miriam. Anything to add?
I don't think that we have anything to add unless, I think the only comments that they had on our drawing was that because they wanted to basically keep the structure of the carport, so whoever walks along the street would notice that this was later on kind of enclosed. So they want to see the posts exposed when we basically put the walls. I think that's the only condition that now we have. So
Let's, thank you. Let's go over your application. That's this document. I'm holding up the application page that shows the fee paid. Do you see in the, next to your names, there are 3 lines, it's one for owner, one for occupant, one for contract owner? Right underneath the date? The top of near the top of the document?
okay.
It says I, we, Ashgar.
Yes.
And then at the end of that line, you see the 3 areas, owner, occupant, or contract owner? You see those 3?
Next to your name.
Oh, yeah, that's here.
Do you see how it's blank there?
Which one are you?
Exactly.
I'm in this one, no? So
Are you the owner?
I'm the owner.
Occupant or contract owner?
No, I'm the owner and
Are you,
occupant.
you've moved in, you live there?
Yes.
Okay,
Are you both owners?
Yes,
You own the property, you're married,
yes.
and so you own it jointly as a married
Yes.
couple?
Right. So we'll call that owner.
Okay.
And then, owner's name, it would be you and your wife, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And there are no other owners of this property, right?
And you see down below the solid black line, you
Yeah.
see where there's only one name where it says owner's name?
Yes.
There should be two, correct?
Yeah, we have my wife's
Okay.
signature, but yeah, of course. Yeah.
And
Oh, there's
then,
two
yeah, that's her
signatures, but
signature
only
next
one
to
name.
yours. There are two distinct signatures there, right?
Yes, that's my wife over here.
Okay. Now, the next page is the disclosure statement.
Yeah.
This is where generally it would be, and number 3, as Mr. Melnick pointed out, you have an equitable interest in it, even though it hasn't been paid off yet. So really, that section should show you and your wife's names and these lenders.
Okay.
Those should be reflected there. And let's see. Then the issue of the notary. It looks like this was notarized in the District of Columbia.
It's the
But
state
there,
of Virginia.
and I guess that's the signature of the notary next to in that.
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, that is not as concerning to me because it's merely
Mr. Chairman,
Miss Mellis.
is there a presumption that the notary has to be in the state of
No.
Virginia?
No.
Okay, it just happens to be that the form is filled
Yeah,
out
I mean,
this
we
way.
see out of state notaries all the time.
Okay.
DC is not uncommon. I've actually seen them in Maryland too.
Okay.
Just don't bring an out-of-state expert into a Virginia court. Don't do that.
Okay, got it.
So we have a condition to fix this.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Mr. Rissy, can this be corrected during this meeting such that it would meet whatever conditions your office might have?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So with those corrections, if you would simply note on that hopefully, Mr. Melnick, anything more with respect to that?
Yeah, those are the only things I noticed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, this matters with the board.
I'll make a motion.
Ms. Mellis?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution approving the use permit V-11469-19-UP-1, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Melnick. Been moved by Ms. Malice and seconded by Mr. Melnick to grant the subject use permit in the instant case. Any further discussion?
Can I just ask my question again? Is there a need for us to condition correcting the ownership documents and the HALRB? I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm just asking the question.
I don't know that there's need. I'll work with the applicant to revise the disclosure statement. I don't believe that there's a need to condition your approval on HARLB's approval.
Since we're not making any changes or anything to, okay, great, thank you.
But it's our expectation that revised documents will be filed for the financial disclosures and application.
Yes.
Okay.
Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the application signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it, and this motion is approved. Thank you very much. Please call this hopefully next to last case.
Case number V-11470-19-UP-1 is a use permit request by John and Margaret Schaus. The owners permit a right-of-way setback of 15 feet to the porch, 14.5 feet to the porch eve instead of 21 feet to the porch, 19.5 feet to the porch eve as required from the 24th Street South right-of-way, and to permit a side setback of 5 feet to the porch, 4.5 feet to the porch eve instead of 10 feet to the porch, 6 feet to the porch eve as required from the left side property line. Regarding a new front porch in the R6 zoning district on premise known as 704 24th Street South. Staff recommends the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Rissy? Hearing none. John and Margaret Schaus, welcome. Anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Board, thank you for hearing us. We welcome any questions, but we have nothing to add.
Ms. Freshman?
I'm looking at the neighborhood approvals. I noticed that the property that's technically behind you, which is 2412 Grant, doesn't have any comment. I'm assuming that if they were going to object to any of it, they would object to your rear addition, which is by right.
That was our assumption as well.
So,
we did not talk to them about
yeah,
the porch.
the porch is nowhere near. Just because typically we do want to hear from the neighbor behind, but I think these circumstances are unusual in that sense. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman.
Mr. Chair?
I defer to Mr.
I'm
Melnick.
going to go with Mr. Melnick first.
Yeah,
I think he feels unappreciated at that end.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Melnick.
Okay, so in case V1147019UP1, I'd move that the Arlington County Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit with the conditions as stated.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Mr. Owen.
I'll let Ms. Freshman.
No worries.
I actually was going to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that a second then?
No.
Or not?
Okay, I'll second.
Well, I'm sorry, let me correct the record. Ms. Freshman seconded the motion made by Mr. Melnick. And discussion, Mr. Owen?
Yes, the tax map, or what we refer to as the tax map, shows a parcel at 701 24th Street South. Who owns that? Directly across the street from you.
I believe the county owns that. That is Nellie Custis Park.
So there's two parcels on that map. Is that something staff has in the slideshow? Do you have the tax map?
No.
Is that behind Linden or behind the church?
Yes, it's directly behind Linden.
Okay.
There's an overhead shot, though. Yeah. So where the big pile of dirt is, there's two parcels, and so that's all one county park, is what you're saying?
Correct. It is all under construction right now.
Okay. So county real estate services probably got a formal notice about this, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Owen, for that question. That's I hadn't realized, that's very interesting. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of granting the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it, and the matter is granted.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Freshman?
I just wanted to say that the only commercial property that I'm aware of that we've ever dealt with is on a block from here on the corner of Grant and 23rd. And it's, at least the exterior is all done. I recommend if you haven't seen it, you might go and look at it because it was very controversial, but it looks a lot better than what was
I
there.
remember that case. I know
Was that Michael's case?
Barnes had that case.
Oh,
That was
Michael
I
Foster,
don't-
the architect?
Yeah, it was the real estate lady, and anyway, it was
okay.
very controversial. But it's a vast improvement for the neighborhood.
I got you. I was thinking of someone else.
Northwest corner, opposite the church, and it's just, they did a good job, and we struggled mightily with that since we rarely have anything to do with commercial property. So, when you're driving around doing site visit.
Okay, please call the last case. Thank you very much, you all.
Thank you.
Case number V-11471-19-UP-1 is a use permit request by Brett and Alyssa Morris. The owners permit a side setback of 6.1 feet to the wall instead of 8 feet to the wall as required from the right side property line, and to permit an aggregate setback of 16.4 feet instead of 18 feet as required regarding a new two-story right side addition in the R6 zoning district on the premise known as 5113 3rd Street North. Staff recommends that the board adopt the attached proposed resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rissy. Questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Owen?
I don't have a question of staff, but when Ms. Malice asked earlier if we could only accept Virginia notaries, I thought I'd flip through our other applications and find another out-of-state notary and say, look, see, here's a good example of how we accept out-of-state notaries. And this one does have an out-of-state notary, but then I noticed that, which I had never looked at the notaries before. Mr. Melnick is such an expert on this. I'm learning a lot about these. But the county's form states that the notarization occurred in Arlington, even though it's a Maryland notary, which is somehow worse than leaving it blank, I guess.
Exactly. Or what I do in my practice, I strike through.
Yeah.
And write in the appropriate.
But if that really happened in Arlington, then the Montgomery notary had no power. However, then I noticed that the stamp that the notary used self-proves Montgomery County.
Right.
So I'll just point that out, and I guess I'll have a question for the applicant when the applicant appears.
I bet they presumed that they were going to go to a Virginia notary here in Arlington, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, but the notary should know better.
Yeah, they should have crossed it through.
They should have crossed it out. But I'll have a question for the applicant about that.
Good job, thank you. And that usually is the sharp pencil for the disclosure statements and the minimum requirements.
I still credit Mr. Melnick for this, because I wouldn't have gone looking for notaries today if it hadn't.
Exactly. Okay, the applicants are before us, Brett and Alyssa.
I'm sorry, I came in before even the staff presentation, if there was one, right? No.
We're done.
We're done, okay, sorry.
We can have another one if we, we'll repeat it though
good.
for Mr. Owen's benefit if necessary. Okay, welcome. Anything to add?
Well,
You can
obviously,
comment on the notary.
I work in Maryland at a school there.
we
So
were
that's where we got it done.
we were up against the clock to get the application filed in time for this hearing. And the only way to get us both in front of a notary was for me to go out to her school, which is in Potomac, Maryland. So that's why it was notarized there.
Potomac, Maryland.
The fact that you went to Maryland is the right answer to this question.
Yes. Yeah, I
So
mean, it's...
you telling us you actually signed this in Maryland
Yes,
is
we
all
did.
that we need to know for
I
it
can
to be okay.
have my notary,
Yeah.
verify.
And you're allowed to sign it in Maryland with a Maryland notary, but
Yes.
you're not allowed to sign it in Virginia with the Maryland
Correct.
notary.
It was signed in front of the
Signed in
notary at her
Maryland.
school.
At my school.
We don't have anything further to add. We obviously are okay with the staff's recommendation, so we're just here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Any questions of them beyond the mystery of the notary? Hearing none, I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Malice?
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the attached proposed resolution approving use permit V-11471-19-UP-1, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Been moved by Ms. Malice and seconded by Ms. Freshman that we grant the motion to allow for modifications requested by the applicant. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And the ayes have it. The matter is granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So much.
Have a great night.
All right,
Yep.
see you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Owen,
I move approval of the minutes as presented for the May BZA meeting.
is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Mr. Owen, seconded by Ms. Malice to approve the minutes as
No,
presented.
Freshman.
I'm sorry, Ms. Freshman, as presented. I was looking to the right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, and the minutes are adopted.
Did we have to do something with the withdrawal or no?
Any,
No.
Staff report for that.
any,
I move adjournment.
is there a second?
Seriously?
Been moved by Ms. Freshman and seconded by Mr. Smith that we adjourn.
Thank you.
Oh.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?